Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to start the project by building your cylinder base for your slab mug. I would say this is probably one of the most difficult parts of the process, so once you have this created, it's all downhill from there. So this is one I made earlier in the day, just to show you what we're kind of going for here. When you guys get your clay, you're going to need your canvas cloth underneath. You're going to need slab rollers, a rolling pin. I'll probably have about 2 of these out per table, so you're going to have to share. You're going to need a ruler. You're going to need a cup to trace, and then you'll need your orange toolkit. You're also going to want, obviously, your clay. I'm going to be giving you a good size amount of clay to do this project. And then we're going to have to share these as well, but you're going to want to have your texture pattern nearby. So we're going to start by rolling out our base. I'm just going to take a smaller chunk of clay and I'm going to gently press it with my hand, with the palm of my hand, to kind of flatten it out. And then I'm going to put my slab rollers right beside my clay and take my rolling pin and just start to roll this out. So the reason we have these slab rollers here is so that we don't go any thicker or thinner than this. So we want our slabs to be a good thickness, but we don't want them too thick or else they'll get air bubbles and explode. If your slabs are too thin, they run the risk of cracking and breaking, just like with our pinch pot project. Some of you guys made your slabs too thin and then they break. So we're going to be taking just a plain cup, and I'm just going to gently stamp this in, and this is going to give us the base of our slab mug. So all of us should have the same size base. That way they all look kind of similar. I'm going to take a needle tool and just carefully cut this out. And if you notice, when I was rolling out my base, I flipped the clay to either side, so then I get a nice smooth base. So once you have that cut out, take the excess clay and just add it to your giant clay ball. And then I'm going to take a little bit of slip on my fingers and just gently smooth out any kind of bumps or lumps. Okay, so this is the base for our mug. So I'm going to set this off to the side. And when you guys are working, making your slabs, you're going to want to make sure you have a lot of room on your table. So if you normally keep your books on your table, today you really don't want to have your books on your table because you're going to want to be able to have lots of room. So what I'm doing first, I'm just going to wedge my clay, and that's when you're just kneading it like pizza dough. And what this does, it gets the clay ready to be rolled out into a slab. So I'm taking pressure and I'm just pushing down. And then I'm going to roll it again. You're just taking pressure, pushing down, grabbing it again. And this gets rid of any clay bubbles that you might have in your clay ball. So what I'm going to do is just take my palms and kind of flatten it. You might need to stand up when you do this. And then I'm going to put my clay slabs out. I want them about, I would say 5 inches or so apart. It's okay if you do 6, that's fine. And then I'm going to start to roll out my clay with my rolling pin. So I've got my slab set up, rolling pin. I'm going to start to roll. I'm applying pressure downwards. Now it's going to feel kind of awkward at first because you have this big lump of clay and you're trying to roll it out. It'll get easier as your clay gets flatter. So then I'm going to carefully flip this over and roll out the other side. And these slabs are here as my guide. So I don't want my slabs moving outwards. I don't want my clay going out like this. I want to keep it kind of going in this long rectangular motion. And then I'm going to gently peel and flip this again. So now my slab is about as flat as my slab rollers here. So that's a good sign that we're getting close. Now if you see like any lumps in your clay, that's most likely an air bubble, so you can just pop it with your needle tool. You don't want any air bubbles in your clay. All right, so we're gonna add a texture now. So I'm gonna put on a little bit of slip just to make my clay workable. You can use your rib tool to smooth out any kind of weird cracks or lumps that you see. So just a little bit of slip and then a rib tool. Now, like I was saying the other day, you can make your own texture if you want. You would just carve into your clay, maybe using a needle tool, maybe use a wooden tool, or maybe use one of the ribbon tools to sculpt. But if you want to make this a little easier on yourself, you can use the texture tools. So I'm going to use this wood grain one, and all I'm going to do is lay this down, and I'm going to gently roll this. So when I peel up, we've got this cool texture going on. And it's okay if you go off your clay a little bit. We're gonna end up cutting this clay down to size anyways, so it's really not a big deal. I wanna make sure that I'm applying the same pressure each time I roll. We want all this texture to be even. We don't want any to be sinking down deeper into the clay. All right, so now I've got this really cool texture going on, a bunch of wood grain. So now I'm gonna cut this slab down to size. And you always wanna roll your texture on before you cut it to size. That way, when you cut, it's really precise and you don't have to worry about adding that texture. So my cylinder that I made this morning is 4 inches tall. So I'm gonna go up to the edge of this piece. I'm gonna go as far out as I can because we can always cut it down if we need. And I'm gonna indicate where I just did 4 inches. So that is 4 inches wide. I'm gonna go down to my other side and do the same thing. And then I'm gonna use my ruler. So now we have 4 inches here, 4 inches here. I'm gonna use my ruler to cut away any of the excess clay that we don't need. I'm using my ruler and a needle tool. And all this excess, you can actually save this, just put it off to the side because you can use it later to make your attachments and your handle, which we'll talk about on another day. I want to make sure I'm cutting down to the canvas cloth because if you don't cut deep enough, you're not going to remove the excess clay. And I always want to use a straight edge when I'm cutting to get nice straight lines. Now when you guys are making slabs, you want to try to get your actual cylinder constructed in one class period. Let's say the bell rings and I have this big slab rolled out. It's going to be really hard to store it back in your clay bag. You might ruin your slab. So you want to try to get it done in one class period. Okay, so I have this nice slab. It's pretty even. It's a nice thickness. What I'm going to do now is grab my base that I made earlier, and I'm going to make sure that this fits all the way around. So it looks like I might need to roll just a little bit longer. No, it might fit. Okay, so it fits pretty well, but what I'm going to do before I put it together, we need to slip and score. So I'm going to unroll this. If you feel like your slab's not long enough, because that does happen sometimes, you can roll this out again just a little bit thinner, but then you would have to redo your texture and remeasure. So you want to make sure that it's long enough before you go through all those steps. So I'm just going to slip and score with my needle tool all along this edge. We're going to be putting our slab around the outside of this base. I'm going to take my slip, paint it on. I'm going to score the underside of my slab too, where I plan on attaching it to my base. And then I'm going to score the sides of this as well, where we plan on putting them together. And then I'm going to put on my slip. Like I said, if you feel like your slab's too long, you can always cut it down. The problem happens when it's too short, and then you're gonna struggle to bring your piece together into a cylinder. So now that I have my slab sitting upright, you guys need to close up that seam. So you can use your fingers, you can use a wooden tool, you can also use your rib tool. You just want to be really careful, especially since you just laid down all that texture, that you're being super gentle. Now on the bottom here where you guys see that, the crack where the base is and then where we wrapped our slab around, you're going to want to take your rib tool and just smooth that out. Because if you go to make yourself some hot chocolate and you pour your hot water in there, if it's not watertight, it'll leak out of that area. Now before you put this up for today, you want to make sure that anywhere that looks kind of like uneven, you can tap it along the base of the table to make the top even. You want to take anywhere you see like cracks or rips, you want to take a little bit of slip, your rib tool, and just smooth it out. Especially where you're going to be drinking out of this, you don't want any sharp edges because that would cut your lips. So I'm going to smooth all along. If you feel like your cylinder's kind of caving in or it's like kind of awkward and it's not keeping its shape, you guys can stuff some paper towels in here to keep the shape until it's dry enough to hold the shape on its own. You can also clean up the bottom edge by using your finger. And then your last thing, just really make sure that that seam is shut. Okay? And from here, once you have the cylinder made, then you can start making your attachments, which we'll talk about later, and you're gonna make your handles as well.